I respect the judge. The sentence he came down with today is his decision. I fully respect him and totally respectful of this entire process on the legal side. Also want to make one other statement before I talk about a broader topic. More than any person in the Trump administration, I testified before the Mueller Commission for more hours. I testified in front of Chair Schiff and the House Intelligence Committee more than any other person in the Trump administration. I testified in front of the Senate Intelligence, I think more than any. All about the issues related to Russiagate, to all of that, okay? The same process every time. I had lawyers that were engaged. They worked through the issues of privilege. And at that time, I went and testified. And this thing about I'm above the law is an absolute and total lie.
What is good, Osiris here, stuck in the middle, and a person that I was very off on personally. This is before I started the channel. This is when I was blue-pilled. I didn't speak out on it because I wasn't confident on it. So I'm glad that I didn't take my ignorance and then be arrogant about it, which is a really bad place to be. But I just want to let the buffer go. Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon, this whole thing came down. This is the sentence. Former White House senior counselor Steve Bannon sentenced to 4 months in jail and a $6,500 fine on 2 counts of contempt of Congress. But Judge Nichols says he will stay the sentence, meaning he won't have to, it'll be like put off, if Bannon files his expected appeal. So I'm still reading it and finding out what's happening. To me, it sounds like he is going to appeal. I always said I think he wants to take it to the Supreme Court, and it doesn't look like to me he'll do any time. The J6 committee is done. I mean, with that red wave, and I know I am assuming here, don't take that assumption as don't vote or anything like that. If it doesn't happen, then we've got way bigger things to worry about than even Steve Bannon. If we can't get a red tsunami under these circumstances, and what would happen is that would dismantle the whole J6 committee, because the House would be red and they would say, get out of here with that stuff. And they might still do a committee, but I think they should just, at this point, I don't think they should even worry about it. I think they should look at tangible things for people. So if you do a J6 committee, maybe it's more about how did we handle this from a political standpoint to create this environment? Same with Black Lives Matter. The federal government can only do so much, but how did the federal government play a role in creating an atmosphere where a black man, and we don't know how he dies, and then riots happen? Same thing with J6. How did we create an atmosphere where people felt like they needed to go there and do these things that didn't really make sense? They're just releasing frustration. How did we get to the point? Did the federal government play a role? I guess there's only so many committees you can do. We've got immigrations, we've got the pandemic. I think those are more important and they cover some of the same topics. So to me, the message is we're not going to do a J6. We're going to go on to something else. But that's what I would prefer. But when we look at what's happening to Bannon, I'm going to go back real quick just to touch on this. I'm going to have a take. Somebody asked me, and I retweeted Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and others who said, I stand with Bannon. And somebody asked me, well, what do you mean? Why do you stand with Bannon? I'm going to get to that at the end. Stay with me. But I do want to touch again on why this whole thing went down. And I did a brief summary of this on Twitter, and I'm going to go over that right now. So here's what happened on Twitter. I went over kind of a little breakdown of Steve Bannon's contempt of Congress trial. How did we get here? On June 30th, 2021, there is this House Resolution 503 that was passed in the House as a rule. It established a select committee to investigate the J6 attack on the Capitol. So that's how everything started with that resolution. 11/12/21, Bannon was indicted by a federal grand jury on 2 counts of contempt of Congress stemming from his failure to comply with a subpoena issued by the House Select, that same committee. And I have the receipts here if you want to look at it. This is him being indicted, and it kind of takes you through everything here. So that's the first 2 bullet points of what happened to me. He has not been charged with anything. If people are confused about this, not even close. He has not been charged with anything that has to do with insurrection, conspiracy, sedition, or anything closely related, just for the record. Here's my take on his decisions. September, Bannon got a letter from Benny Thompson, and it demanded documents by October. It demanded Bannon appear October 14th. It referenced this this resolution 503 as their authority. Bannon chose not to comply, citing executive privilege. And I have the receipts here to show it. Bannon and Peter Navarro are the only ones to be completely non-compliant. What most people did is they came in and pled the fifth. And that's what Trump could do. I think Trump is officially subpoenaed as well. But that thing's going to be dismantled. I don't think it's even going to come to that. But say it did, Trump would have the option to come in and say, I plead the fifth. The funny thing about pleading the fifth is, from my understanding, from listening to lawyers, from Robert Barnes and others, you can come in and say, take a little dig at the committee and say, I don't recognize this committee's subpoena powers and I plead the fifth. You could say whatever you want, and that would be kind of funny if Trump took that route. I think if Trump did testify, he would go that route, pleading the fifth and taking a dig at them while he did it. Just my opinion. All the paperwork references that House rule, like I said. You see where I'm setting this up. I keep talking about this HR 503. The Republican National Committee challenged the legitimacy of the whole committee based on this. The HR 503 stated 8 Democrats and 5 GOP members on the J6 committee. We only have 7 Dems and 2 GOPs. And obviously the 2 GOPs are non-MAGA, but it doesn't matter. They're really GOPs. HR 503 stated that the GOP ranking member would be on. We're talking about tenure here. So we're talking about tenure here. There is no ranking tenure member on so they're not so the point is they're not abiding by the agreement. A Trump appointed judge ruled against the RNC. So that ruling did not go through. I think it should have. I don't understand why it was ruled against. I think Steve Bannon is taking this case to the Supreme Court. The argument is the sham committee doesn't have subpoena power. Now, I don't know what happens if it gets dismantled. Does the whole thing fall apart? I don't really know. But the question is, where is it getting the subpoena power from? If they keep referencing the HR 503, but they're not even following that. Now, keep in mind, the House is in the legislative branch. Now they got the subpoena, they're going to the judicial. So they can do whatever they want in the legislative branch, but once they step outside of that and then say, hey, judicial branch, I need you to enforce this, the judicial branch does not have to say, oh, yeah, because you guys did this, you can make up your own rules and do anything. The reason why they can still do the J6, even though they didn't match the rules, is because the House makes the rules. So nobody can step in and say, well, House, you didn't follow your own rules. You can't until you step outside your house. You might have rules in your own house, like how you play a Monopoly. It's house rules. So in my house, this is how we play Monopoly. When you step outside, we don't play Monopoly that way. So if you want to play it that way, go back in your house. That's the same thing with the separation of powers. They went to the judicial branch. The judicial branch absolutely can look at it and say, you didn't follow your own rules. We're not recognizing it. The judicial branch has their own house. They can say, well, for whatever reason that we think, you didn't follow the rules, so you get checked. That is the whole point of the separation of powers. But I've talked enough about that. Let me get back to the end here. And the end of this is why I kind of mess with Bannon. This person asked me on Twitter, kind of just posing the question like, hey, why do you mess with Bannon? What do you see with Bannon? I think it's a great question to ask, to force someone to articulate. In the Tucker-Kanye situation, Tucker asked Kanye, why do you support Trump? And Kanye was honest. He didn't really have any substance there. He said, well, I like how boisterous he is, basically, kind of is what he said. So I'm going to go and point this out and just say, hey, there it is. So here's the person here. Dimitri says, but what is it about Bannon that moves you to stand with him? I'm just going to show a little bit. One thing, I don't identify as African American or black or whatever because I don't know what these things mean. But I do like that for those who do identify like that, Steve Bannon speaks with them with respect and not condemnation like many others do. Here's Steve Bannon.
African American males are also another central part of our coalition. And you wait, we're going to get 50% of that vote in 2022. 50%. And once we do that, we have a governing coalition that's right in front of us, right there in front of us, that can govern for 100 years. African American.
So some people looked at that as a negative. I looked at it as like, bet. You respect people who identify as black men, and you said we can rule together for hundreds of years. Let's talk. Let's come to the table and talk. That's why I talk to these freedmen and the ADOS. I'm like, y'all, you guys are in no man's land. You don't rock with the Democrats and you don't rock with anybody else. You don't rock with the populist left, really. I think this is the perfect spot for you. It's just, it's just literally my opinion on it. But there's more. I've got many more reasons. There's a lot to like about Bannon. I played on a recent video on George Floyd. I messed up my audio, of course, but this is Steve Bannon on George Floyd.
Where Steve Bannon, the guy who was portrayed as the Grim Reaper on Saturday Night Live, is the one that has the best, most heartfelt, most emotional, most populist takeaway from the George Floyd death.
I mean, let's go to Mr. Floyd and I say this all the time about George Floyd, and I don't want to talk about the crime that was committed against him. That's a different topic. But I would say let's look at his life, right? When he died, he had CCP virus, he had COVID-19, he was on fentanyl and opioids, right? And he didn't have a great job because all the manufacturing jobs shipped overseas. Think of what George Floyd's life would have been if we had had a manufacturing base. He would be a supervisor or a foreman at a factory or a junior management. He'd be closing up opening up his summer home to go fishing up in the lake country of Minnesota, with his second home up there, a little cabin he could if he didn't have the opioids that shipped in by the Chinese Communist Party through the cartels in Mexico across open borders, with everybody making money on the way up and the huge profits in that, to poison him and no opportunity for a job. And to top it all off, the Chinese Communist Party virus that the elites and the scientific priesthood has basically helped fund and help do. He had the CCP COVID-19 virus in him. He had the virus in him. He had fentanyl in him. He didn't have access to a great job because all the great manufacturing jobs are shipped off. Look, that's the Greek tragedy to me of George Floyd, is that he was in that position that day. And by the way, let's talk about the fake 20. Well, that's also the CCP, and we know that these foreign entities are putting out this fake money all the time with the opioids to do it. That was what
Yeah, there's a lot to like there. And he does talk about policy on how to change that every day on the War Room. And you know what? In fact, he doesn't even talk about it a lot. All he does is bring on normal people to talk about it. People running for office at local school boards, House, Senate, whatever, and gives them the platform. And he challenges them. He's not just giving them a platform, he'll ask them questions. And if they say something that he doesn't like, he'll push back a little bit. So it's not like it's just some type of one-way echo chamber. This is they recently had a debate about, it was something about Russia where he got them, what were we debating about Russia? I forgot, but he brought on Darren Beatty and somebody else. Oh, it was about the pipeline. People were disagreeing on who might have sabotaged the pipeline. Darren Beatty felt one way. This other analyst felt another way. He was like, here's your take. Here's a place for you to have your take. And that's great discussion. You don't get that from the left. So again, you've got even more things to like, Dimitri. I can go on and on forever. Some of his stuff I can't play on here, but he's providing the blueprint. He also said, end the Fed. So there's a lot to like here, and I could go on forever about it. So it's funny you ask. I have a lot of things. If you do not, I don't want to echo chamber here, of course. If you do not rock with Steve Bannon, if you do not like Steve Bannon, I want to hear from you. If you do, obviously I want to hear from you. Let's talk about it. And if you don't, I really want to know. And what does he say? What does he do? What do you not like about him? Thanks a lot. Take care.